Hi guys. So,
what's up everybody? My name is Jaryn from Berkshire Bike and Board, and we got a new show coming to everybody called the Tonight Bros. Premise of the show is this: viewers, customers of the bike shop, fans of the YouTube channel can write in via Google form or moving forward comments on our YouTube channel and ask us any question. Ideally, we're going to try and keep it fairly service department related, but we are going to do our best to answer any and all questions as you will see moving forward. So the goal of the show really is to educate riders, bike riders, on all things bike related, especially in regards to service and maintenance on their bicycles. So without further ado, we've brought in a few new cast and crew from the bike shop to help me out with this. So Tucker, why don't you tell us who you are, what you do here at the bike shop, and what your favorite bicycle to ride is.
hi everyone, I'm Tucker. I'm a mechanic here at Berkshire Bike and Board, and my favorite bike to ride is my Transition Patrol Enduro bike.
Levi.
My name's Levi. I am doing all things to keep the service department running smooth here. Favorite bike, they're all good, but I think that Specialized Como takes the cake.
Ooh, good answer.
Oh yeah.
My name's Jaryn. I do a little bit of everything here at Berkshire Bike and Board, and my favorite bike is probably right now, as much as I don't want to say it because it's kind of basic, is my aluminum Tallboy, carbon wheels, pretty simple setup, but thing rips just about anywhere.
Oh yeah.
So, now to the dialogue. Question number 1 from Richard P. is, what is the best way to measure your chain wear at home, and why is it important? We'll start with Levi.
There's a slew of chain measuring devices on the market these days. We use a real specific one from Shimano. And basically it's a little tool that you put in the chain, and it just measures how much the chain has stretched, as they call it. The tool doesn't do the best job of saying how worn the chain is, but it does tell us when the chain is worn to the point that we cannot put a new chain on the bike without running into drivetrain skipping issues or whatnot. So we really like that tool here at the shop because when a bike comes in, we can use the tool, we know where we're at. If it's not measuring totally worn and there's still some life left in the chain, it's always a good idea to just kind of stay ahead of it and keep up on replacing your chains so you don't run into worn cassettes, worn chain rings, more expensive issues.
Tucker, to you. How often should you check your chain?
I'd say checking your chain every 6 months. Check your chain every once in a while.
Okay, good try. Levi, can you correct him on that?
It's really tricky to say. I would say anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 miles is good. If you really want to stay on top of it, changing your chain every 1,000 miles is going to really prolong the life of the cassette and chain rings, which are much more expensive to replace. It also varies by how you're riding. If you're going out in the winter, you're riding in the salt, sand, snow, you're not lubing your chain, you're going to come up on that replacement interval much quicker. So it could be, you know, we've seen instances on the e-bikes of people who have never lubed their chain, completely wearing through one in 300 miles. So just keep up on that daily maintenance of lubing your chain, you know, every ride, every other ride. And yeah, keep the chain checker on hand once you get up into that 1,000-mile mark.
Good deal. Okay, one of my perfect questions, which is usually a pretty good debate here at the bike shop. I may weigh in on this with my own opinions. This one's coming from Yankin' My Bike Chain 1995, and the question is, should I put tubes or tubeless on my new road bike with a 30mm tire? Tucker, lead us off.
I'd go tubeless wheel set. Tubeless has a lot of advantages. You can run lower pressures.
There's no tube to pinch flat.
No tube to pinch flat. Advantages of a tube, they go flat less of the time.
Okay, we're going to Levi. So, if I'm going to buy a new wheel set for my bicycle, and I'm not sure if I'm going to run tubes or tubeless on my road bike, but I'm planning on running a 30mm tire.
All right, we all come from the mountain bike side of things. Maybe not so much Jaryn. But we love tubeless. We pretty much only ride tubeless on our personal bikes, on our mountain bikes. When you get into the road side of things, it's a little bit trickier. The lower the pressure of the system that you're running, the more reliable the tubeless tire is going to be. So the narrower the tire, the higher pressure we need to run it at, regardless of tube or tubeless. So, you know, in the old days when we were running 23mm road tires, we were running them at 100 pounds. Some people were running them more. And basically that's kind of the max of what, you know, these tubeless systems can handle. So 23 millimeter tire, I'm definitely putting a tube in it. 25, I personally will put a tube in it. I know you can do both. 28 is kind of where you can go either way. 30 on my personal bike, I would definitely go tubeless. Again, with the gravel bikes, wider road tires, 32, 38, you know, tubeless for sure. But yeah, right at 30, it can be left up to preference a little bit. So for sure, I would say the main benefit of a tube is that there's less maintenance. If anything does go wrong, you put a new tube in it, you're back to square one. With the tubeless, it is a little bit higher performing. You're less likely to get flats. It's actually a little smoother rolling as well. But you do have to kind of keep up on topping the sealant off. And also, if something does go wrong, you might run into an issue where you have to retape the rim to make sure everything's running smooth.
All right, I'm chiming in. Personally, because I have opinions, 32 millimeters or higher, I go tubeless regardless of the bike. 32 millimeters or lower, I put a tube in it regardless of the bike. Reason being is 28 mil tire, 25 mil tire, road bike, high pressure. I don't want to have to deal with the challenges that sometimes crop up if I get a flat tire on a tubeless tire at 28 millimeters. The tube has worked for me in the past. As long as I pump it up every single time I ride, I don't have issues with flat tires. So if they ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Jaryn likes to wait until it gets a little bit wider with the tires to move over to tubeless. I think at 30 I'd be running tubeless.
The next question, a little bit trickier one. Oh boy. Johnny V writes in, is the cost worth it to upgrade to a Di2 or an electronic shifting group set?
The cost is significant. If you just bought a bike and it's got a great 11-speed system on there, everything's really fresh, I might hold off on the upgrade. As you've had the bike for a while and you're starting to wear through some of the components, you know, maybe the derailleur's been bent a little bit or the shifters are scuffed up, and if you're looking at replacing some of those parts anyways, then it's a great option to kind of replace that whole system at once. A lot of the companies too are doing like upgrade kits, so on the mountain side of things, you can, if you have a SRAM Eagle drivetrain on your bike, you can just buy a derailleur and shifter, right? That cost is a lot less than on a road bike where
you have to replace shifters, brakes.
Okay, question about road bike. To you, Tucker. If I have an Ultegra group set, what's it, R8000? R8000, yes, group set, and it's mechanical, and I want to update it to R8020 Di2?
Yeah.
8120?
8120? Can I just buy shifters in front and rear derailleurs, cable, battery, etc., or do I have to buy chain rings, cassette, and all that stuff too?
So the cassette, chain ring, chain, those don't have to be replaced, but also the brakes will have to be replaced.
Not the caliper, but the lever.
Not the caliper, but the lever and the shifter, those will too, along
Which is
with the front and
expensive.
rear derailleur. Yep.
Are we right?
You guys are correct, yeah. So, yeah, it's a significant job. The brake calipers you potentially could swap over, but if you're buying a kit that has shifters and calipers, it's always good to go that way. The kind of hidden cost there is there are some internal battery and the wires are run internally. So there's a significant labor charge on that as well. Again, kind of like what I was getting into, if you've had your bike for a year or two and you're due for a big service, anyways, you know, we offer a full winter special, which is basically the most involved service that we have. That's the time when you're going to want to do this upgrade, because you're kind of overlapping those costs instead of just throwing a bunch of money to do something that might not need to be done at the moment.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, next question. I'm gonna let Tucker guess the answer first. Anyone who comes to Berkshire Biking Board knows that Levi is always wearing Birkenstocks. And coincidentally enough, the real Radidus fanboy wrote in and wants to know how many pairs of Birkenstocks has Levi owned in his entire life? Tucker, your best guess.
Okay. 5?
5?
No, 3.
No way! Alright, I'm gonna go like this. 2 pairs a year.
2 pairs?
Roughly
Okay.
30 years old. So probably started around 5. That's 25 years. I'm gonna say 50 pairs.
When I first started kind of getting into Birkenstocks, you know, I'm outside a lot. I'm playing in the dirt a lot, so they're not really the best shoes that can hold up to moisture or dirt. So for the first few years I was wearing them, I basically would buy a pair. I'd wear it for 6 months straight, and they would be absolutely whooped. Get another pair and just rinse and repeat. I've kind of moved on to now to where, you know, I have a bunch of pairs. I have my my pair that's already beat, so if I'm gonna go out in the rain, I'll wear those. I got my dress pairs. I got my, my sister for Christmas got me a pair with a sheep wool on the inside. I honestly have no idea how many I've had. I probably have, I don't know, 6 pairs at the moment. I've probably had 20, 30 pairs.
Okay, 20 or 30 pairs. Okay, this one comes from Anonymous, but it actually got written in on the Q&A, so I'm gonna read it and see what you guys think. If you're gonna use Bush's baked beans instead of Stan's sealant, what do you think will seal a flat tire faster? Hickory flavor or maple bacon?
Maple bacon, obviously, because you have the fibers from the bacon, and you know, you already use bacon strips to plug your tire. So just having that extra bacon in there is really gonna help keep your tire inflated over those long rides.
Yeah, I think that the maple has that tacky consistency.
Yeah, exactly.
Too, that'll really help plug up the holes.
So we're going maple
Bacon, for
Yeah,
sure.
hands down.
Okay, this one from Single Tracker Die for Life, Lyfe. Specialized Stumpjumper or Santacruz Tallboy for entry-level New England trail rider?
I'm gonna change this and go Stumpjumper Evo.
What's the Evo mean?
Evo is their longer travel Stumpjumper.
Those bikes are relatively similar, but they are a little bit different in travel. Tallboy is 120, 130. Stumpjumper is 130, 140. Tucker blew it out and went up to 150, 160. So
That's what you need.
I think, yeah, with that little bit of extra travel that the Stumpjumper has, it's going to be a little bit plusher of a ride. I know that Santa Cruz's design philosophy on the mountain bikes has been, especially with the Tallboy, a little bit more on like a responsive, firmer ride, as to where that Stumpjumper is supposed to be a little bit more plush and forgiving in some of the rougher stuff. So Berkshire County, it's rocky here. Either bike is going to be a phenomenal choice. The Stumpjumper, like I said, I think is a little bit more forgiving, as to where the Tallboy is probably a little bit sportier, a little bit, you know, firmer of a ride.
Okay, follow-up question from myself. Specialized Santa Cruz, 2 arguably higher-end brands. We don't really know what the Santa Cruz lineup for 2023 is going to be quite yet. If I'm going for bang for my buck, and I know I'm going to a shop that has only Santa Cruz and Specialized mountain bikes, am I going to get a better value with the Stumpjumper, or am I going to get a better value with the Tallboy?
Stumpjumper.
For sure, yeah.
What's like the base price for a new, like the entry level Tallboy? I don't think that.
Yeah, Tallboy's only made in carbon, so that's going to be the first hang up there. I think that the base model Tallboy is probably somewhere around $5,500, and it's going to have more entry level componentry. So you are going to get that, you know, that awesome frame that we all know and love here. That would be great for upgrading in the future, but it's not really a bike that comes to mind when I'm thinking about value. It's more about all-out performance. I know that in the past, Specialized has offered, I think it's an alloy comp build that's in between $3,000 and $4,000.
Yeah.
Somebody's getting into the sport and they want to buy a bike that they can grow with. It's not going to hold them back, but they don't want to spend $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $14,000. That's a bike that would do really well around here. Yeah.
Stumpy wins.
Even though the Tallboy's the best bike ever made?
A Place to Put My Junk writes in and asks, what is the best way to use a power washer on my bicycle?
Short answer is never. I wouldn't really risk it getting into all the pivots and bearings and everything.
All the bearings, the suspension is real sensitive to pressurized water. It'll actually push dirt into the small crevices, which will cause more damage than just never cleaning the bike.
E-bike ports.
Yeah.
E-bikes especially, yeah. The e-bikes can handle the water from a normal hose. E-bikes do not like to be washed upside down. They're basically designed to have the water drain from the top down.
I'm gonna chime in on this one. My personal favorite way to wash my bike after a muddy day in the trails, and I'm a hack, just so we're clear, is I put the bike on the back of my T2 on the back of my car. I drive straight to the car wash, and I car wash my entire car and my entire bike, and I've never had any issue with it. But don't take my recommendations. Moving on. Here's a question from me, actually, because I never can tell until Jay goes, "Damn, you gotta replace those." The question is, from myself, how can I tell when my tires are shot?
Some road tires, they'll have like a little wear indicator that you can pay attention to. So it's typically just a little hole in part of the tread. And once it like starts getting past that hole, that's when you replace the tire.
Levi.
It's a really tricky question to answer because you can get away with running a worn tire most of the time, but sometimes things just pop up that are a little unexpected. There's multiple ways that a tire can wear. So the one that comes to mind the most, that's probably actually not the most common, is tread wear. So on a road tire, like Tucker said, there's little dimples in the tire. And basically when the rest of the tire wears away so that those dimples are no longer visible, that means the tread is completely gone. Some of the road tires can handle quite a bit of mileage. Something else will come up before the tread is actually worn. The third way is dry rot, especially on some of the higher end tires that we see. They're designed more for performance than they are for longevity. So that rubber is really soft, and if you've had the bike for a couple of years, that rubber can develop cracking. Basically, I would say, you know, if you look at your tire and
I'm cracking up, so I got another question.
you think it's due to be replaced, it's probably due to be replaced. We have customers that replace their tires every single year, no matter how many miles they did. For peace of mind, they tend to have less flat tires. I will run my tires until probably past the point of when I should, but for me it's really easy. I have access to these tires. I can change a tire really quickly.
Follow-up question. If you are gonna race every single stop of the ESC, Eastcoast Enduro Mountain Bike Series, and you can only pick one front tire and one back tire to run every single race, Levi, what would you choose?
For sure, I'd run a Maxxis Assegai up front, soft compound, probably downhill casing. Super, super grippy tire, a little bit slow rolling, but for me, it's worth it.
Huck Norris in the front or not?
It would depend on where I was
one
racing.
setup, every track.
So yeah, I would run Huck Norris in the front. So that's a tire insert. It's a little bit less popular these days. It's a lot lighter than many of the inserts, and it offers less protection. So I would run that in the front tire. In the rear, I would run Cushcore, which everybody's familiar with. It offers more protection, but it is a lot heavier. So for sure, inserts front and rear, downhill tires, just because I don't want to deal with traveling 6 hours to a race, paying entry fees, and then getting a flat tire. Rear tire is going to be a Maxxis DHR2, downhill casing. I run them in the soft compound on my personal bike. If I needed it for the year, I would run a harder rubber.
Pretty similar. Assegai in the front, DHR2 in the rear. I'm a little lighter than Levi, so I'd be running a double down casing front and rear. No Cushcore or any inserts in the front. Just for my riding style, I tend to hang off the back a little more, and then I will run Cushcore in the rear.
Okay, I'm gonna chime in. Maxxis high roller in the front. I don't know what the compound or any of that is, but high rollers in the front. Maxxis high roller in the back. I would put a Cushcore or a Huck Norris in the back, whatever one was cheaper and more available. And I would not get a flat tire the whole entire series because I don't get flat tires on my mountain bike. I'd probably win too.
Of course.
Okay, moving on. Group 12 Ride 21 Ripper writes in. How do I tune my rear derailleur if I just put a new cassette on my bike?
If it's a new cassette, you don't have to do anything, ideally.
If it's the same cassette.
If it's the same cassette.
Okay, what if it's not the same cassette?
If you're jumping to maybe a bigger sprocket, assuming you have all the correct speeds and everything, bigger sprocket in the rear, you're gonna have to adjust your B tension, and that's basically just gonna move the derailleur out from the cassette. So it'll be able to clear that cassette, hopefully. It's a tricky question because depending on how big you're going, you might need one of those extensions for the derailleur, but.
And some wisdom from Levi?
If it's like for like, there's usually not much involved with replacing a cassette. Yeah. If you were to keep the cassette but replace the rear wheel, the nuances of the rear wheels don't always put that cassette in exactly the same place. So to piggyback on that question, if I would be more concerned about making adjustments after swapping a wheel than I would after swapping a cassette. Yeah. As always, we're here to help with issues that you're having.
All right, next one. Question from me. How can I tell when my brake pads are shot?
So I'm assuming you're talking about disc brakes here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Does anyone ride V-brakes anymore besides Jay Allen? Who's Jay Allen?
Probably the best thing to take away here is to know what a new brake pad looks like. So either next time you get new brake pads or if you have a brand new bike, just visually look at those pads. They have, I don't know, it's probably 5 millimeters of material on them, maybe somewhere around there. Regardless, you can visually look at the pads right on the bike and just take a peek. If you notice that they're getting thin, that's when you take the rear wheel off or the front wheel off and do a little bit deeper of an inspection. So the like I said, the pads start off full. As you start to wear, you'll actually maybe notice that you're having some brake fade. The levers are pulling a little bit closer to the handlebar. That's always a sign that they could be due to be replaced. I like to replace them around maybe 30 to 40% of that original pad height. Once you start to really push it, that's when you really get poor brake performance. So.
Just to add to that, when you're looking down at your brake pads, they have those little metal spreaders that keep the pads pushed against the caliper. And once the pads start like getting close to that metal spreader, that's a good indicator to when you should replace the pads.
Yeah, and it can be a little deceiving too because they don't always wear evenly. So if you're concerned, taking the wheel off the bike, removing the brake pads, and looking at them off the bike is the best way to tell.
Sheldon Black writes in, what is the easiest pattern to lace a new wheel up with if I've never laced a wheel before?
3-cross pattern is the most common. If you've never done it before, I don't necessarily think that one would be harder than the other. But a 3-cross pattern, drive side and non-drive side, is probably going to have the most literature on it. So most of the YouTube videos or Sheldon Brown writings are going to be about 3-cross patterns. So I'd say not so much on it's actually easier or harder, but it's going to have the most literature. And now that I think about it, actually a radial lacing would be the easiest. So that's where the spokes go straight from the hub. They don't cross anything and they just go right up to the rim. Those are common on older rim brake bikes, front wheels. So
another tricky one. They're two. They're both from the same person, which was Jason Steffen's brother, Brew. How can I tell if my mountain bike has the right amount of air pressure in my tires?
So there's always going to be a max pressure printed on the side of the tire. To find like the correct pressure for you, it all depends on body weight and riding style and everything, whether you're running inserts or not. For me, I run around 20 to 25 PSI depending on the terrain I'm riding. What do you run, Levi?
Well, let's back up a little bit. You go out and you ride at that max pressure and you're thinking, oh, this is a max, should I go lower? So what are some of the benefits of lower pressure?
Yeah, so lower pressure to a point is going to give you more traction on whatever you're riding. Higher pressure is going to be a little more bouncy, but you're not going to have quite as much traction. But higher pressure will reduce the threat of pinch flats and everything.
Or rolling. If you're running 15 PSI in your mountain bike and you rail into a corner, I'm rolling the bead, or at least rolling the tire over.
Yeah, so I would say start on the higher side and just start dropping pressure and see how it feels. So what I would do if I was on, say, a new wheel, new tire that I'd never ridden before, is I'd start a little bit high. I'd let pressure out until you're going to start, like Tucker mentioned, you're not going to have much traction, you're going to be sliding around. It's not going to be as compliant, so you're going to be kind of skittering around the trail. You start lowering it starts to feel better and better and better and better. Then you're like, wow, this feels really good. And then you rip around a corner and the tire doesn't have the support like Jaryn mentioned. And then you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna take a little more out just to see how it feels, and you get a flat tire. Benefits of low pressure are more grip, more compliance. The negative is tire rollover and you're more likely to get a flat tire. So just drop the tire pressure until it starts feeling really good and you're not getting flat tires and you're not rolling the tire in corners.
Okay, here's a bad answer from me. I run 29 on the front of my mountain bike and 31 on the back all the time, no matter what I'm doing. I run 50 PSI on my gravel bike, front tire and back tire all the time, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what tire it is. And then on my road bike, we've got a janky air compressor downstairs, and I just gas it up until the air compressor runs out of juice on my road bike, and whatever that is, that's what I run my road bike tires at.
About
and
90.
I almost never, how much is it?
I think it's about 90.
About 90, and I pretty much never, I'll probably get one tonight, get flat tires. Tons of grip too.
I like running a little bit higher pressure than a lot of people on the mountain bikes, so I also just have my tire pressure numbers that I run almost regardless of the setup. 25 in the front, 30 in the rear.
I run more. Never had
That's
any
why
issues.
you never get flat tires.
I don't get a lot of flat tires.
Yeah.
Okay, challenging question. How can I tell if my mountain bike has the right amount of air pressure in the suspension?
If you have too much pressure, the bike might feel a little bit harsh. You're not going to be using the full travel. So, when you get done with your ride, if you look and the little O-ring on your fork or shock weren't at the bottom of the stroke, there's probably too much air in the suspension. It's not the end all be all, but you actually want to use all of the suspension that you have. So, a lot of us have 170 millimeter travel forks or bikes, and if we're only using 120 millimeters of that travel, then we're not really getting the most out of the bike. You want that O-ring to be towards the bottom, if not at the bottom of the stroke. And then the opposite, where if you're feeling the bottom of your suspension, you're hitting a big bump and you're bottoming out. It happens from time to time, but if it's happening a lot, then you probably have you probably don't have enough air pressure.
Yeah, that's a pretty common misconception that I get a lot, is like people are always afraid that they're bottoming out too much and that it's bad for the suspension. I bottom out pretty frequently, and you know, it's not a huge deal. So yeah, just finding that balance.
It's not a bad thing, like Tucker said, as long as it's not happening all the time.
Right. And you can always start with measuring your sag. So that's just the amount of travel that you're sitting into just with your body weight on the bike.
This one. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's just a baseline for setting up your suspension. So 30% sag, that's always a good baseline to start with.
Yeah. The other thing too I've noticed in the past is if I'm running too much sag or not enough air pressure, I'll start pedal striking. So if you've noticed that your pedals are hitting the ground, again, it does happen, but if it's happening consistently, you could always try bumping up the air pressure just a little bit.
I never bottom out, but that's just me.
You probably do.
You don't notice it?
Yeah, so that's another thing too, is like there's a difference between using your suspension and completely bottoming it out. So very rarely do I get that feel of, you know, what a lot of people think a bottom out is, where it's metal on metal. Yeah. So that's like a mechanical bottom out. There's also, you know, more of like a practical bottom out, I think, is where you use 95% of your travel and the air pressure in your suspension is just so high that it's almost impossible to get through that last couple percent of suspension. So that's what I consider bottom out, more so than I definitely have had that, you know, full metal on metal, and that's something that, yeah, I wouldn't expect that to happen very often. I wouldn't want that to happen very often.
Puck to flat.
But I think when you get to that point, it's probably going to happen regardless of how much pressure you have in your suspension, if it's within reason.
Single Track or Die for Life, LYFE, writes in with their second question: is it worth it to buy a brake bleed kit and do it myself at home?
Really depends on how many brakes are bleeding. A lot of the time a brake bleed kit will cost more than what it actually just costs to have a shop bleed your brakes.
How much is a brake bleed kit, do you know?
I'd say they're comparable to the price of getting your brakes bled. So $45 per brake is what we charge here. If you go with a reliable kit, which I would recommend, I usually just get the ones from the manufacturer. So SRAM for SRAM, Shimano for Shimano. I think they're anywhere from $50 to $100 depending on the kit. I am a big fan of having a fresh bleed on my bike. I do it quite often. Tucker, I'm sure, does it multiple times a season. So
before a race weekend every time?
I wouldn't say every time, but if my brakes aren't feeling 100%, then I'm going to bleed them. The thing is, once you kind of tune in to what a brake feels like when it starts to need a bleed and you're sensitive to it, you're going to want your brakes feeling really nice all the time. And if you're the type of person that feels comfortable tackling a brake bleed, then I think it's a great idea. The nice thing with a brake bleed is, within reason, the worst thing you can do is maybe contaminate your pads and just need to bring in for a bleed anyway. So there's not much risk of doing any long-term damage, but there's some technique involved.
Okay, follow-up question. If you're racing the entire ESC series in New England, or Enduro series, call it 10 races, how many times are you going to bleed your brake during that season?
Seasons probably run from April to October, roughly. I might bleed my brakes every 45 days.
5 times, give or take?
Yeah.
Tucker?
Yeah, probably about 5 or 6 times. I'm actually looking to race the whole circuit this year, so I'll probably end up doing something similar to that. Yeah.
Ask me.
What? Jaryn, how many times do you bleed your brake per season?
0.
Works
like a charm.
He says that, but he also has
He also replaces his bike every 4 months.
That's true. And I have Tucker bleed them if they need to be bled.
That's the thing, is Jaryn probably bleeds them more when he feels they need to be bled. So he may not be as in tune with how the brakes feel when they start to go a little soft. So he'll probably push it further. But I bet you if he wasn't happy with his brake performance, he would bleed his brakes or have them bled.
Fair enough. This is the last question, and this is coming in from Steel is Real, REEL. What are more durable, carbon or alloy wheels?
Aluminum wheels are gonna kind of give you some hints to when they're about to fail. Carbon generally is just gonna, it's gonna be fine, and then all of a sudden you're gonna hit it on a rock or square edge hit or something and it's gonna break. Typically gonna be more catastrophic than aluminum. What are your thoughts on this, Levi?
Let's see, so it's a little bit tough of a question to answer overall. I'm gonna go with carbon. When carbon wheels first came out, they were really focusing on having low weights. Now that I think bikes have gotten a little bit heavier and a little bit more durable in general, especially on the mountain side of things, a lot of the carbon wheels are focused more on durability than they are on weight savings. So I have Santacruz reserve wheels on my bike. The weight on the rims themselves is not super competitive if we're just talking about weight. When you're talking about strength to weight, that's where they really shine. So sure, there's lighter alloy wheels, but these wheels hold up for me extremely well. The other benefit is that if you do break one while riding with the Santacruz wheels and with many of the other companies, they're gonna replace that for free, so you're not gonna have to worry about it. To reinforce what Tucker said, there's tons of instances where you can hit something, nothing happens to the carbon wheel. You keep on riding until you do reach that breaking point. With the aluminum wheels, especially riding downhill trails, what I find is there's constantly little bits of damage being done to the wheels. So you get to the end of a season and yeah, you can ride your bike, but your wheel's all wonky, there's dents everywhere, there's dings, and you need to replace that rim regardless.
Okay, that's it for this episode of the Tonight Bros. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, hit the subscribe button, please, because Stefan won't let us buy anything new for the YouTube studio until we get to 1,000 subscribers. So, with that said, round up for distance, round down for time. Thanks for watching.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Had a wife who couldn't keep her. Put her in a pumpkin shell. There, kept her for a while. I know you have a close, you know what I'm saying?
Everything the best.
Let me just put it on cinematic and see what that looks like.